Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you a picture that was shared by a friend of mine. Now, it is not confirmed whether or not this is a poster or whether or not this is from the actual episode itself. Based off of the text that is on the screen, it appears that this might be like a poster or like a pre-image of what we're going to get, but considering how low quality it is and the fact that this isn't official, this just seems like a really cheap job. But we finally got a chance to see what it appears to be what we're going to get in Yu Yu Hakusho. Now, guys, if you take a look at the background here, it looks like this could be a variety of different things. Now, as you can see, there's a police officer in the background to the left, and it also looks like we have some ambulance or fireman type workers in the background here too. So clearly there's something that's going on. There's a lot of people that are around in a scene. It looks like civilians are observing what's going on. Now in the back you can see a crane, so it could be that this might have been taking place before the incident. But for anybody who's watched Yu Yu Hakusho, you could probably guess what this might be in the first episode of Yu Yu Hakusho, where there was a little kid that was running out into the middle of the street, and Yusuke essentially sacrificed his life in order to save the kid. Now, because Yusuke died by accident, and he wasn't supposed to die at that particular point in time, he got a chance to redeem himself and to get life all over again. Anybody who's seen Yu Yu Hakusho would know this. Now, looking at this image, this could either be something that people are doing in the background before the incident, and this is a ghost Yusuke just looking forward at us, or this could also be another alternate thing too, where this is kind of just a pose for the Yu Yu Hakusho show. But the text just looks so low quality, this image is just so poor that it's just hard for me to believe that this would actually be the poster for the show. Like, usually posters have a lot more detail, a lot more quality, much better text than this, and this looks like you just slapped together some extremely basic Photoshop, you know, on a low-quality image from, like, 2008 and put it together on top of a picture and just said, hey, fans, this is going to be the star of the show. So, if I were to guess, guys, I think this is probably a leaked image and somebody put the words Yu Yu Hakusho over this because we have no details where this came from. I looked this image up, nobody's talking about this, so one of the funny things about being pretty much the only person talking about the Yu Yu Hakusho Netflix series is because I'm literally the only person, or I guess one of the few people talking about this, there really is no way to confirm these images. Things are just coming out, and I'm trying to confirm it with the absolute best information that I can. But there's a lot of things that we can talk about as to what we could expect with Yu Yu Hakusho going forward. So, we've already talked about whether or not this is a poster or a direct scene in the show. We can see that Yusuke doesn't have quite the haircut of what he had in Yu Yu Hakusho, but obviously he's a human, so you can't really design him the exact same way an anime character's hair would stand up. And if you look at Yusuke's expression, he looks completely out of it, so it appears that this might be the ghost Yusuke. Now, this is going to be a very interesting thing here, guys. When Yusuke died, he looks like he's there, but how are they going to use that effect for the show? And this brings up a question about Botan, because there's no possible way you can have this show without Botan. Like, I mean, she's basically the Bulma of Yu Yu Hakusho. Literally, she's basically the Bulma. She's a blue-haired chick that literally comes into the beginning of the series and meets the main character and is the ultimate support character throughout the entire franchise in the exact same way that Bulma is. So, when you think about it from Botan's perspective, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, is she going to be a traditional witch in the sense, or the traditional Grim Reaper where she's on a broom, you know, flying around and, you know, trying to assist Yusuke in trying to get back his life? Or are they going to do something completely different where you just have a humanoid-looking character without all of that witchcraft stuff that just kind of talks to Yusuke in a more modern, less over-the-top witchcrafty kind of thing? I think that that's a very interesting question that we have to bring up here. And what we also have to understand here, too, is that when we look specifically at this picture, one thing that we have to understand about Yu Yu Hakusho is he goes through a rather interesting first arc in Yu Yu Hakusho before he even comes back to life. Now, using cinematic pacing, it's going to be really interesting to see how they gloss over these events, because we have no idea how far this show is going to go. Yu Yu Hakusho has 4 main arcs, And considering the fact that the third, or shall we say the second arc, is by far the most popular, because you have the Spirit Detective arc where Yusuke, Hiei, Kuwabara, and Kurama are all together fighting against those Saint Beasts, and then you eventually get over to the Dark Tournament, which is what fans, as I've told you guys before, feel is the best and most popular arc of Yu Yu Hakusho. And then I also feel like the Sensui arc is really good too. And then we have the Three Kings arc. Now this brings up a really interesting question. It feels like this series would be a complete shame if it never got to the Dark Tournament arc, but I feel like there's so much stuff that they have to cover that I feel like it would be literally impossible to just completely like gloss over the first arc. Because there's so many different things that they have to do that even with increasing the pacing of the show and, you know, having to meet characters like Genkai and go through all of that stuff, it feels like if the Dark Tournament were to ever happen, that would probably be Season 2. Now, the reason why this sucks is because that's the best arc of the entire franchise, and considering that there are so many different fighters in that tournament, similar to the Tournament of Power, from completely different realms, or shall we say, teams, more specifically, unlike the Tournament of Power. The thing about it is that's going to require a massive budget to have demons fighting each other in a tournament, which brings up an interesting question of if this first season is a complete flop, are they even going to do a Season 2? Now that would suck because the best arc would be Seasons 2 and 3, but if you completely just flame out because the first arc is so terrible, that would suck that you never even got a chance to get to the best part of the show, but maybe that's a good thing because you did such a bad job that fans would be happy that it ended early. There's so many questions with this, guys. I feel like this is probably the most uncovered, you know, things coming out here, because Yu Yu Hakusho in its prime was a show that really, I mean, outside of Dragon Ball, at least in the United States, for its smaller stint in America, Yu Yu Hakusho somewhat rivaled Dragon Ball. Now, of course it got stomped. Nothing could compete with Dragon Ball. And Sailor Moon was obviously extremely popular too, especially amongst women, but, or shall I say girls. But the thing that I should say, though, is Yu Yu Hakusho held its own with the most popular shows growing up. And it would really suck that they would put so little into this show and then it just completely flames out, guys. Like, I feel like Yu Yu Hakusho is one of those shows that it can just get casuals to just fall into it, because if you just follow the script of the show itself and just not do the absolute worst job you possibly can, you kind of can't fail with Yu Yu Hakusho. I really think it's that good that for a new audience on Netflix, it would really bring in a lot of casuals, and those casuals would want to go back and watch the original series. And I feel like the awesome thing about Yu Yu Hakusho, even for the English dub, is that the English dub was actually very good, especially for that time, because Funimation didn't have the greatest reputation at that time. They've improved light years from their earlier years, but Funimation did a generally good job with the Yu Yu Hakusho dub, and I think the Yu Yu Hakusho sub is even better. So when you factor in all of these things and the fact that there's so many different characters you have to meet, like you have to meet, you know, Koenma Jr., you know, for example, like Koenma Jr. is another integral character into the Yu Yu Hakusho series, and how are you going to do the whole afterlife thing? You know what I'm saying? Like, and there's a lot of other questions too, like Pooh, because if you guys remember, in the first arc of Yu Yu Hakusho, you know, Yusuke goes through all of these trials, and then he receives the egg, and then the egg eventually hatches into Pooh, who is essentially Yusuke's spirit animal. And if you know anything about Pooh, you would know that, you know, he's definitely a toy that, you know, is very, very, you could say it's an extremely marketable toy for kids. And, you know, eventually Pooh grows up later on and all of that. But the point that I'm trying to say is there's so many things that they have to do. Like, is Pooh gonna be something that gets completely written out? Because that's a major part of Yusuke's journey, especially later on, where he effectively evolves as Yusuke evolves throughout the series too. So ultimately, guys, the ultimate take about this show is this: there is basically no information about this show. We have a picture and we have 2 notifications that there's going to be a trailer on November 6th, and we're going to get a full show on December 14th on Netflix. That is literally it. The fact that the details are so close to being released, but all this time, like even from a year before, we've got literally nothing out of this, no leaks, nobody's talking about this, is one of those things where it's like, is it one of those things where it's just not getting enough attention, people don't care? Are they being very tight-lipped about this? Is this being horribly marketed? And that's the biggest fear. Like, maybe this show is actually decent, but it just gets horrible marketing. Honestly, guys, we don't know, but I want to have a lot of fun with Yu Yu Hakusho, and I do want to say in addition to this, guys, that let's have hope for this, just like Dragon Ball Daima. I understand that at the onset of Dragon Ball Daima, it doesn't seem like a good idea for a show, and when you consider the horrible reputation for how live-action shows get adapted, Yu Yu Hakusho doesn't seem like it has a lot of potential, but I'm going to be positive. I am excited to at least see how they try to do it, and if it's a disaster, it's going to be a disaster, but I will continue covering this and discussing this for you guys.